Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from TWRP, Over the Top. TWRP is a band that I've been following since about 2015. I really enjoyed some of the EPs they had out around the time, and going forward after that, I only grew more and more invested with this group, with every release that followed those EPs from 2015. The couple of EPs they dropped between 2016 and 2017 were two of my favorites of those 2 years. And when it came to the first two records from this band that came out last year and the year before that, they were some of my favorite records of those 2 years as well. So I was really excited to see what these guys wanted to do on their third full-length album. I was very interested to see what this record was going to sound like, considering when it comes to the last two albums from this band, I felt like each one explored different aspects of this band in a really interesting way. Together Through Time explored the very catchy side of the band, with big pop hooks and lots of features, and it was a kind of record that felt like it was really trying to do a lot during its runtime. It ended up being a very maximalist project by the band's own standards. In comparison, Return to Wherever was an album that felt a lot simpler, a bit more stripped back. There wasn't really any features on that project, and the whole thing felt like a very cohesive, tight album experience. I really like both records, but I also felt like both had their own things going on for them. And I was interested to see if this new record here was gonna, do its own thing too, or if it was gonna sound like one of those older releases, or maybe a combination of sounds from some older releases. And overall, Over the Top is a project that kind of does all of that in a sense, because this project does have some sounds and ideas similar to stuff on the previous releases from this group. But at the same time, it has just enough new stuff to keep longtime listeners invested. In terms of the sound of this record, you're pretty much getting a lot of these same ideas and elements that TWRP have explored before, all of the elements that are essential to this band's core sound, if you will. The really flashy, sharp-sounding guitars, the fantastic bouncy bass, the really hard pummeling drums, the really upbeat, happy-sounding synths, and of course those robotic vocals too. All of that is still present here on this project, and I feel like the band here on this thing is at the top of their game when it comes to their performances of these different ideas and sounds. Pretty much all of the instrumentals here on this project are some of the best sounding and some of the best performed in the band's entire catalog. For example, the track Top Secret that comes towards the end of this thing is this instrumental track which features this really fantastic bass work on it. The bass is easily the most standout part of this entire track. It just has this really great thumping sound to it that instantly draws your attention to it. It's easily the part of this track that steals the show in the best kind of way. Dr. Sung's vocals here on this project are at their best too in the band's catalog, I feel. There's so many moments here on this project where his robotic vocals just really add to the atmosphere of these tracks in a really fantastic way. And he also has so many catchy moments on this project too, between some of the hooks and melodies on this project. I just feel like he's at the top of his game here when it comes to the vocals. As I said before, this project in some ways feels like a nice middle ground between the band's last two releases, and one of the most obvious cases where that is true, I feel, is when it comes to how these tracks work in relation to each other and how the tracks are sequenced here on the project. I feel like each song on this thing had its own little identity, much like the tracks on Together Through Time, but at the same time, they all work together to form a nice album experience, much like Return to Wherever. I feel like some of the best moments on this project is where the band decides to step out of their comfort zone a little bit and try something new. Of course, you do have some really fantastic moments on this thing where the band is playing around with their signature sound, but I feel like some of the more interesting moments on this thing do come from some of the collaborative tracks and some of the moments on this thing where the band is doing some new ideas. For example, you have the track with Planet Booty on this thing, Need Each Other. Far from the first time these two bands have crossed paths, but I feel like this track here is another really cool collaboration between the two. I feel like the vocalists from Planet Booty pair up really nicely with Dr. Sung. I think that the two, or the three rather, have some really great moments on this thing where they're playing off each other, and the instrumental to this track is just killer too. When it comes to some of the other tracks on this thing with features, I think the track Destination is pretty great. The track features The Gambler on vocals alongside Dr. Sung, and I think the two have really great chemistry here on this track and are able to make this really great anthemic rock track unlike anything else in the band's catalog. You also have the song Top Secret, which features Andrew Huang doing some of these synths. I already mentioned the track earlier when talking about that fantastic bass work on it, but overall, even outside of the bass work, this is just a top-tier instrumental. Though probably my favorite track on this thing with a feature is the track Black Swan featuring Danny from Ninja Sex Party. This track sees TWRP taking their signature brand of synth rock and synth funk and pushing it into a more progressive direction when it comes to the songwriting. This track is pretty lengthy, it has multiple parts to it, it feels like TWRP's version of a lot of those older multi-part progressive rock tracks in like the best kind of way possible, because really every part of this track is fantastic. The song starts off a bit more subdued, but as it goes along it slowly builds into these various different sections that each sound fantastic. You have some moments on this song that are a bit more hard rocking. You have this really great climax at the very end of the song which really showcases Dan's vocals in the best kind of way. And you also have these really interesting moments on the track where the instrumental will become very electronic and Dr. Sung's vocals will come in. It has this really dark sound to it as well. I really like the sound of these portions of the track, not only when it comes to how they compare to Dan's portions of the track, but I also just really like the dark, almost aggressive sound that these parts of the track have to them. The sound is almost reminiscent of some of the earlier material that the band put out back a few years ago, some of the earliest EPs, as well as maybe some of the darker ideas Phobos was exploring on that solo EP he dropped earlier this year. But really every part of this track is fantastic, from the performances from all the members of TWRP and Dan. They all do a great job with their parts, to how creative every part of this track is, to just the excellent flow of all of these parts when put together. Black Swan really just ends up being this really fantastic track on TWRP, certainly one of their best songs just ever to date. And I really hope that maybe one day we'll get to see these guys maybe do a full album of tracks like this, where maybe they're exploring, bigger, longer song structures and things like that, because I think they could do it really well if this track here is any indication. Aside from the tracks that I've already mentioned, another one of the highlights here on this thing, not a track that features a featured artist, but just a TWRP solo track, is the closer to this thing, Grand Prix, which is another instrumental here, and I guess serves as a sequel or successor to the track Typhoon Turnpike off their last record, which is one of my favorite songs off that record. And I feel like Grand Prix is not only a great follow-up to that track, just thematically speaking and sonically speaking, but it also serves as a really great closer to this record as a whole. It's just a really fantastic instrumental from these guys, one of their best to date. Aside from the sound of this record and the different song ideas, structurally speaking, another part of this record that I think is pretty interesting are the lyrics here on this thing. And I've always found TWRP's brand of lyrics to be pretty interesting. The way they handle really upbeat and positive lyrics is something that they're able to pull off that many artists, I feel like, aren't really able to do all that nicely. Lots of artists try to be really happy and upbeat, but maybe just come across as maybe being a bit corny or a bit annoying, but that's never really been the case for TWRP. They've always managed to pull it off, I think in part due to the instrumentals pairing up with the lyrics so nicely, and in part due to just the sheer earnestness of their delivery of all of these song ideas and topics. And all of this is still very much true for Over the Top, but I feel like some of the lyrics here on this record see the band at least talking about, maybe indirectly at least, a lot of 2020 related stuff, I guess, and by that I mean just, world events and stuff going on in the year 2020. It hasn't exactly been the most upbeat of years. In fact, I'd probably say it's been a pretty bleak one overall, and TWRP's music is kind of the opposite of being super bleak. And in response to the really dark year that 2020 has been so far, TWRP are, essentially responding to it in their own unique way, and they think they do it really well. For example, on the second track to this thing, Roll With It, the band is essentially talking about how, the times are changing and, life is changing and all that, and in response to this, you just gotta roll with it pretty much. You gotta accept the change, you gotta adapt to the change, you gotta understand that the world is changing, and, just go along with it pretty much, and accept it for what it is. The track On This Rock is another moment on the project that sees the band talking about accepting change, and particularly accepting the fact that the world around us is currently changing, and just being hopeful for the future, things like that. Again, I think the band keeps a lot of those same ideas that they've always toyed around with, the hopefulness, the upbeatness, all of that is still here in the lyrics of these couple of tracks, but at the same time, I just feel like they're applying it to a more specific example this time around, and I think they managed to do it in a way that no other artist out there is really doing right now. The track Need Each Other is another moment on this project that sees the band talking about, essentially needing each other. They have Planet Booty joining them here on this track, and, they're just talking about, how humanity needs, to be together, maybe not physically right now given the whole pandemic stuff, but, emotionally speaking, we need to be there for each other. And right about now, I think that's a good idea considering all of the bad stuff happening in the world. We gotta, be uplifting, we gotta support each other, we have to help those in need, and yeah, be there for each other pretty much. Another track I found to be kind of lyrically interesting on this thing is the track Only the Best, which on the surface at least seems to be talking about, mothers and being positive about mothers. And I have to wonder if maybe the mother in question here is supposed to be like Mother Earth, given that TWRP have talked about environmental themes in their music before. I don't think it would maybe be too far out there for them to be talking about it here on this track, or maybe this song just literally is about their moms and I'm just looking into it a bit too much. But either way, I think it's another good track on this thing. So overall, the lyrics here on this project are pretty good in my opinion. In fact, they're probably some of the best the band has written so far. I'm just still really impressed by the fact that these guys are able to pen lyrics so positive and cheerful and uplifting and not have it come across super annoying or anything like that, while still at the same time applying it to real world ideas too. These guys are talking about real situations, but they're doing so in this very upbeat way, and compared to a lot of other 2020 themed music I've heard this year, it certainly sticks out for that reason, because most of the 2020 themed music I've heard has just been super depressing, super dark, which is understandable, but, this record stands out as being a happy exception to the sounds of a lot of those records, and I think for that reason, I might be coming back to this record more whenever I want something a bit more upbeat and hopeful. And truthfully, that's probably what the band wanted with the lyrics and sound of this project. They wanted people to find happiness in a project like this in a dark time, to, be hopeful when listening to something like this for the future, and all of those things. And I think they managed to do a really good job of it. So, yeah, overall, Over the Top ends up being yet another great release from TWRP. These guys just do not stop dropping quality music. So, yeah, this project definitely gets a recommendation from me. If you haven't listened to any music from these guys before, this is certainly not a bad place to start. It has some fantastic moments from the band, some of the best to date, I'd say, especially when it comes to tracks like Black Swan, for example, or Top Secret, another great moment on this thing, or even the opener, Coming At Ya, which I haven't talked about yet, which is surprising because it's another great moment on this thing, a really fantastic opener. But yeah, overall, Over the Top is just a great record from these guys. I highly recommend it. Yeah, give this record a listen. If you like these guys, if you like their style of music, if you like synth-funk, synth-rock, upbeat sounding music, listen to this. But of course, that's just my own personal opinion. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this album in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content. Things like album reviews, countdown lists, discussion videos, things of that sort. Again, thank you guys for watching this video, and stay golden.